segment of Citizens Forum. It's June 11th. It's been an absolutely crazy week in the world. I mean, and in, things are definitely getting nuttier. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack show. So I'll start off. It's now come to the point where barrels of nuclear waste are washing up on the once pristine shores of British Columbia. And it's like, who cares? I heard the story this morning on CFAX, June 11th. A group of citizens who have gotten together to do a cleanup. They go out once every few months or something and do a cleanup of some beaches. I'm not even sure where on the coast, anywhere from north to south. I just don't remember the place. And as they were cleaning up, they came across a barrel with Japanese text on it and the international symbol for nuclear waste or nuclear whatever, I don't know. So on the radio they said, well, that was as close as they wanted to get to it. They reported it, I think, to the Parks Department because that's who they're dealing with. And the guy said, well, I hope somebody will do something about it. So I don't know if that's going to be a story in the media, but that's where we're at on the road that the lunatics who run the world are taking us down. Barrels of nuclear waste washing up on the shores of BC.
Well, and also, Jack, it's not just, it's great that they actually marked the barrel, but can you imagine the radioactivity and all the other contaminated, products and items that are going to be floating up onto the shores of British Columbia? We will never know because nobody's watching anymore, nobody's checking anymore.
It's my understanding that the Harper government, is that what it's called? Harper Canada or Harper government? We're doing testing for nuclear, just I guess Geiger counters, testing radiation in the air and water at certain places in Canada, and all of that was stopped after the nuclear meltdowns at Fukushima. I don't know if that's true. I've heard it several times. How do you find out about these things?
Well, it's, of course, it's a very, very serious issue. And, it really calls into question, what do we know, really? What do we know about so many other issues? If you have this type of contamination that's going to be floating around in the environment and the government can just decide not to tell you about it, what are our chances of really finding out about, say, what's happening to our water with industrial use and all the other environmental questions that we have to solve when our governments themselves are really, apparently, it looks like, deceiving us?
Yeah, so that's an important issue. Our governments, we have to face the fact, do not work for us, and neither does the media, which is kind of, I guess, the theme of this show more than anything else. And if we want, we're circling the drain, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. But if we want to start moving in a positive direction, we have got to regain citizen control of something, at least to have a voice in what's going on. And we've got to have a media that's telling us the truth. Well, since I'm talking about media, here's the Victorian News. It's like, I can't remember where I picked this one up, but this is typical. So here's a newspaper, and it comes to every house, virtually every place in the city, as many as they can get, twice a week. And basically, it's everywhere in the province. This newspaper, and what it is essentially is a means of not selling but distributing advertising. So as far as I know, this is all advertising, and it's food, and and most people get it. And how much do you want? How much do you need? So we all throw it in the garbage can. No, we should throw it in the recycling bin. It's crazy. And we subsidize it by allowing them to chop down our once magnificent forests at essentially no cost. The price is so cheap that it makes economic sense for black press to do this, to give this to everybody for free.
Have you ever looked at a flyer? Have you ever looked at that stuff? I have never looked at it in my
Oh,
life.
okay. Yeah, I've looked at the odd one. Like
I,
if I'm looking for a pair of socks, I want to see what the price is.
I suppose, but I mean, it's just that it's one of those things that I just see. I try to take it out of the paper and leave it behind in the newsstand if I can get away with it.
Yeah.
I mean,
So it doesn't come to your house.
well, some things do, but that weekly you have to pick up. I don't think it
Oh,
comes
okay.
to the
Oh, okay.
house.
Okay. In the city, it's delivered.
Yeah.
Well, so anyways, also on top of that, the front page is really just a Walmart ad. So that's, and anyways, enough of that. I think this should, we and our forests should be able to stop subsidizing this kind of craziness by, by giving them the forests for nothing and letting them destroy the lungs of the earth. Hello. But
That's
anyway,
quite
which brings us,
unnecessary.
which brings us to liquefied natural gas. There was an excellent story in this month's issue of Focus magazine about Andrew Weaver. I'll just hold it up. I think this is a great magazine. There's more in this, which comes out once a month, than in all the news that you get in the news group. Anyways, Andrew Weaver has just been made an MLA. The story was about him, very well written, very interesting. And basically, he was saying in regards to liquid natural gas that there's no market for it. And it's going to end up, I think he was saying that the plan is that we will simply subsidize everything and create a potential supply to compete with other suppliers to keep the price down. But, they'll just have us in the background, something like that.
Well, you'd have to look at it because today there was an announcement that there was $16 billion of commitments to develop liquefied natural gas.
So, of course, people read that and think, well, it's a disaster, but $16 billion. Is that $16 billion ever going to arrive?
What does it all mean? I mean,
And if it does arrive, it's even worse because it's an environmental nightmare of the first magnitude. I mean,
Yeah.
please don't, stop.
well, but I think that will be the reason to build the Site C Dam and the Peace River, to create electricity, and to build transmission lines to go up north to the fracking fields, and all this infrastructure will have to be created in order to help the industry give our water away, for instance. And
not only give the water away to the fracking companies,
That's
but
right.
allow it to be viciously contaminated.
Yeah, but in the end, our resources are all going to be depleted in order to get the industry ready to market a product that really has no buyers right now.
And not only that, but when you say our resources are being depleted, we're talking about our lifeblood. We're talking about
Yeah.
our water, our air, everything, our soil. I mean,
Yeah.
the corporations have got to be stopped. And it's up to us, us poor slobs who live in this country have got to. I mean, I know lots of people are working very hard on lots of issues, and I commend everybody. But we're up against powerful and implacable foes with hundreds of billions of dollars, and plus they control our governments and they own the media.
Well, this is our last chance is to have representation through our elected officials, and I always hold out the hope that someday that somebody might go to bat for us. We're not going to see that with the Christy Clark Liberals. They are so entrenched into that model of development that one can really be. You have to be realistic about that. But the problem that I always really am concerned about is that the NDP, who are also preparing to develop liquefied natural gas, who are also willing to ignore all the problems with the destruction of the water tables, and we're also willing to ignore that there was no market, and who already memorized their lines so well to justify doing this, now are in the opposition. So how are they going to how are they going to criticize the Clark regime?
That's
And I
right,
think
because a lot of people in the province are very critical of this, but we have no political voice, except maybe Andrew Weaver.
I was going
Yeah,
to
yeah,
say,
yeah.
okay, Dr. Andrew Weaver, he's in the Green Party, and he certainly has the credentials to do an analysis. And I mean, he is a climate scientist, and he really knows his stuff on climate change. Let's face it, this is irrefutable evidence. It's almost unbelievable. There can be still some deniers, but also, I think a lot of people will be turning to him and looking for a real criticism, and to the detriment of the NDP. Let's face it; they're going to look pretty bland in their activities if they don't, change course and start looking out after the people and be the real social democrats. The party that they took over. In many ways, I believe the party that's been hijacked by Adrian Dix and John Horgan and a few others.
Mo Sahota.
Most, and these guys are really, if you look at in a broad sense, the NDP would be like the Ontario Liberals, or further to the right.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm a supporter of the NDP. Almost since I was born, my family was NDP.
Yeah.
It stood for something. It meant something. You could believe in something, and I don't know if you could at that time. But the name Tommy Douglas always comes up looking pretty good. It was a bit before my time, but
Well, Ed Broadbent was the fellow.
was he any good? I don't know.
Oh, Ed was fantastic.
Okay. But
and there's a
now-
lot, and Jack Layton. I mean, you could name, especially federally, really some really, really high quality people.
Okay.
And I think the
So
federal
where
party
are they now?
still has lots going for it. But I really
But
think
remember,
that
the federal party is never in power, so they're free to say a pretty good line.
up until now. Now the federal NDP are the official opposition, Jack. So they're getting closer, and they're the only credible alternative to the Harper regime right now. So
Well, don't tell the Liberals with Justin Trudeau, whose party is leading in the polls.
well, let's see if that translates into votes, and possibly it could. And
And the media is going after Harper. I've never,
Yeah.
I mean, in Harper's whole history, this has never happened before. It's never happened that the media has actually, and he's gotten away with, oh my God. I mean, they have allowed him to do massive destruction of the environment, the economy, of the government, of our society. Never a word of criticism. But all of a sudden now, I don't know why or what, or they, what they're planning. And when I say they, I mean the people who own the media. But I guess we're going to see. Just stay tuned, and we'll see what happens to Mr. Harper.
we have to get up in the morning and go to work, Jack. And you have to stay at this 24 hours a day to try to keep up with the shenanigans with the Harper crowd. It's a mind-bending experience trying to remember all the things that they've done. And I mean, particularly like recently with this $90,000 that their Tory chief of staff wrote a check to pay
Well, and
Mike Duffy's illegal expenses.
They just raised the retirement age to 67. I mean, people
Yeah.
at the age of 65, and it was done almost in complete secrecy. In Europe, when they did it, there were massive protests.
Yeah.
Here in Canada, they do it. We don't even know because, there's no leadership. But, I mean, imagine that. People who are 65 are now going to have to wait 2 more years. Not now. It's coming in a couple of years. So, it's a good way of doing it. People
Yeah.
sort of doze off. Shall I go back to Andrew Weaver, or do you want to move on to BC Rail?
Well, I wish Andrew Weaver good luck and good fortune, and I hope he gets up to speed on many other issues, particularly on smart meters. But let's face it, he's a shining light that puts some type of reason back into the discussion. And I really think over the next year or two, when you see him coming out of the legislature, he probably won't be able to say too much in the legislature, but once he comes out into the halls, there'll be a lot of media attention on him. I really think he's going to draw a lot of.
Well, you know, that'll be interesting to see, because if he actually starts saying the right things from at least my point of view, I
Yeah.
don't think there'll be any media attention.
Well, let's
They
find
don't-
out.
Yeah, well,
I
let's
mean,
find
I
out.
mean, if it's the truth, which I hope it is, I think.
If it's the truth, there will be zero attention.
Well, I don't know. I think we're into this era where we're into such a crisis that and really, if Adrian Dix sticks around with the NDP, you know, like Alan Vigneault got fired for not getting the Canucks in the first round of the playoffs. He's the most winning coach in the history of the Vancouver Canucks, and they fired him. And then you have Adrian Dix that led the worst campaign in my memory, and he's not planning on resigning.
That's because he gets to choose if he gets fired.
Well,
But, you know,
nobody's talking
okay.
about him that he should maybe
How
should.
about moving on to the leadership of the unions? I mean, as a member of a public sector union, I know over the past 20 years, people have been destroyed.
Yeah.
Working people everywhere, but especially, you know, people in the public sector unions. There's thousands of people in my union, the BCGEU, who I think are not making what's called the living wage. You know, people think, oh, they're union workers, they're doing real great. Well, thousands of people across BC in the GEU, never mind the other unions, are not making the living wage. Now, being in the union now is like, forget the Vancouver Canucks, this is like the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's been 20 years of futility. And those guys never get fired. I mean, they just...
Yeah, and
where's
it's
the
all
leadership of the union? And I'm still
Yes.
willing to support them if they start to do... They know what they have to do, and one thing they can do is media, because they have the money. The unions have the money to do media, and their refusal to do this, then as far as I'm concerned, they're not doing their job. They're not working for their members, because their members have a story to tell about what's really going on in this province. And for the union leadership to refuse to tell that story
Yeah.
is a disgrace.
Well, I think I was thinking about some topics for the show today, and I was thinking about this Liberal NDP relationship.
You called it a coalition government. Yeah.
I always like to have a coalition government. I got one, the Liberal NDP coalition, and really, what it is a coalition of secrecy and an agreement not to talk about the big issues. And of course, the BC rail sale and the cover-up is not to be talked about again now, apparently. A crime that's never been investigated. And the whole issue around the balanced budget and the Liberals ignoring all these commitments, that the signed contracts, and the government's horribly in debt and running huge deficits, but nobody seems to care to talk about it, and I don't even think the NDP cares to mention it.
Well,
that
we just
much.
ran a campaign where Christy Clark drove around in a bus with a streaked across it, a debt-free BC, and the NDP never told us the truth about the debt disaster that
Yeah.
the Liberals have caused. I mean, I just
Well,
don't
you know,
get it.
and we can go on, and then the smart meter issue, to me, was the issue.
Let's change then, because
Okay.
another thing that Andrew Weaver says, he mentions a legislative committee on health care.
Yeah,
And everybody says, okay, you're going to talk about legislative committee, I'm changing the channel.
that's right. Let's
But
have a nap.
legislative committees are important, which
Yeah.
is why we, the citizens, never hear about them and know nothing about them. I only know about legislative committees a little bit because many years ago I tried to write a book on democracy, which I'm still trying to write, and I found out about legislative committees. This is where the work of our legislature and parliament is supposed to happen, with the good people we elect going around getting information, honest, correct, scientific, social, good information, and feeding that into the political process so that intelligent decision making can take place. Well,
Yeah.
instead, the committees have no power. They're controlled by the premier and the party leader. They're gone. And you know, for Weaver to talk about that, I think is a great thing. And again, read Focus magazine.
Well, I think legislative committees can work. They can publish what they're talking about, and they can give it out to the public. If the government doesn't want to listen to it, they can still
But the premier and the party leader control them, and nothing is allowed.
Well, apparently, but I think
But that's our
that
job,
can
right?
change.
That's our job. Our job as citizens is to tell these politicians, what in the world are you doing? You're destroying everything and allowing everything to be destroyed. You're supposed to be working for us. In fact, you are. We're paying you.
Yeah.
Start working for us. It's our job to do that.
Yeah, and I think too is if we're going to really look at these issues in a more universal way, in a broader perspective, in a greener way, we have to have a conversation about all these issues. The public has to be involved in that conversation, and the wisdom has to come from the collective, discussion about these issues. And if it's always just coming from the Premier's office and some public relations flacks that write up these little short quips that you see in the sound bites, but never any depth, well, you're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to really make good policy. And we're always going to be stuck with this dictatorship of this fake majority where a party can get 25% of the vote of the eligible voters and have an absolute majority and an absolute
and do whatever
power.
they want for the next 4 years, whatever they want. It doesn't matter what we want.
There's a huge problem there.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. Sorry, we're out of time. Thank you for watching this segment of the Walter and Jack Show. Thank you, Walter, and back soon.